Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Birchmeyer, and I am the Director of Operations here at Iowa Wind and Solar. I just want to make sure that everybody can see and hear me okay. So if everything is coming through loud and clear, if you can just give me a heads up in the chat, that would be great. While I'm waiting on that, wonderful. I do want to talk a little bit about the Crowdcast platform we're using and how you can use it to ask questions and discuss with your fellow participants. A few different ways you can ask a question. The first is down at the bottom left corner of your screen. There should be a button that says Ask a Question. This is definitely the preferred method, and I will make sure that I address all of these questions at the end of the presentation. So if there's something that you really want me to see and address, if you can use the Ask a Question button on the bottom left side. There is also the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. That can get to scrolling pretty fast for me, so I will try to pay attention and keep up with that, but no promises on that, and I might miss things in the chat. But it is great for discussion. But if there is something you really want me to see and address, please use the Ask a Question down at the bottom left. I believe we're also streaming on Facebook Live today, so if you are watching on Facebook, you can go ahead and leave a comment on Facebook, and I will look at those at the very end of the presentation if we have time. So we'll make sure if you're commenting on Facebook that we definitely answer your question either on Facebook or via message follow-up if I don't get to it during the live webinar portion. But this is great. So I am excited to jump in today. Our topic is going to be the tax incentives for solar in Iowa. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slides now. All right, so before we get started, I do want to start with the disclaimer that I am not an accountant or a tax professional. So if you have any questions about your personal situation, your tax liability, and anything like that, I do want to say that your best resource is going to be to talk to your CPA. But I do want to spend some time today going over the basically a broad overview of what is available for tax incentives for solar in Iowa, what you'd be eligible for, and how to qualify for those tax incentives. So there's two big tax credits that are available. The first is the federal investment tax credit. So this is available across the US, and it's a big one. It's very nice. And then the second is a tax credit that is just for Iowans. So that's the Iowa State tax credit. I think it's the Solar Renewable Energy Credit. And then finally, we're going to talk about some other tax incentives that are available. There is depreciation for commercial businesses, as well as some additional tax exemptions that Iowa offers for those installing solar. So the first is the federal investment tax credit. This is split up into two different tax credits. One is for business entities, so commercial entities, and the other is for residential entities. There isn't really a lot of difference between the two. So on the back end, there's a different form you file, but otherwise everything is exactly the same. So I'm just going to refer to this as the federal tax credit, but there is a distinction between the business and the residential. The business is the investment tax credit, and the residential is I think it's the residential solar energy tax credit, but they're basically the same other than the name and the form that's filed. So what the federal investment tax credit is it is a 30% tax credit. So 30% of the cost of the installed solar array, you will get back as a tax credit. I put up a little chart here that shows how long the tax credit will last for. So right now it is a 30% credit, and it will continue to be 30% until 12/31/2019. After that, we start to see it decrease a little bit, and eventually it'll end up at 10% in 2022. But we've definitely got a few more years at 30%, and we'll see how things play out on the policy end as to how much longer that will continue. But for this year, you're looking at a 30% tax credit. So this is, again, 30% of the total cost of your solar array you will get in the form of a tax credit. Now, a tax credit is a little bit different than a deduction, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. So with a tax credit, you actually, it doesn't reduce your taxable income, but instead you just take a look at what you owe at the end of the tax year, and you just take it right off the top. So basically, if you were to say you owed $20,000 in taxes, but you had a $10,000 tax credit, that would just reduce your bill by $10,000, and now you would only owe $10,000. This is also, it has the ability to carry forward. So again, let's say you have a $20,000 tax bill, but you have a $50,000 tax credit, then you would be able to pay no taxes that year. And then again, if the next year you also owed $20,000, again, you pay no taxes. The third year you also owe $20,000. At that point, then you'd have $10,000 left, and you would finally owe money on your taxes again. The federal tax credit, it can carry forward up to 20 years. So you basically have 20 years to use up that entire tax credit, which could be 20 years of no tax bills, depending on the size of your tax liability and how much your tax credit is for. To qualify for the 2017 tax credit, these systems must be installed by the end of the calendar year. So you have to have your solar array installed by 12/31/2017. I know the reason that we're talking about this today is that Iowa Wind and Solar has an internal deadline of October 1st to purchase a system by, so we can guarantee you that you will have your system installed by the end of the year. So I know this is why we're talking about this right now. We want to push that urgency because we want to make sure that if you need the tax credit for 2017, we'll be able to get you on the installation calendar and make sure you're installed by then. Another really cool feature with the federal tax credit, so this is again the nationwide one, is that it also has carryback. So if you install in 2017, but you had a tax bill on your 2016 taxes, you can carry back your tax credit for those 2016 taxes. This is only for commercial systems, so this is only for people purchasing with the business. It does not work for residential systems, unfortunately, but it is a really cool feature for those of you with businesses or commercial entities that you'd be purchasing solar with. So if you need that to apply to your 2016 taxes, you can. The other tax credit that I want to talk about is specific to Iowa. So this is an Iowa policy, which is very, very cool. So what they do is it matches 50% of the federal credit up to $5,000 for residential installations, or 50% of the federal credit up to $20,000 for business installations. So works out to basically 15% of your total installed system cost you can get as a tax credit for your Iowa taxes. Again, this works exactly the same way as the federal tax credit. Whatever you owe at the end of the year, you do your taxes as normal, and then you're just going to be able to take off the amount of the tax credit from your tax bill. So it's just reducing the amount of taxes that you owe. This also has the same carry forward feature as the federal tax credit. So again, if you had, let's say you put solar on your home and you received a $5,000 tax credit, but you only owed $2,000 in taxes, you can continue to carry that forward when Iowa up to 10 years to use up that entire tax credit. The Iowa one does not have carryback, so any systems installed in 2017 are only eligible for 2017 and forward. That one doesn't have that cool feature. The Iowa Energy System Tax Credit, the to apply is also a little bit different than the federal. With the federal tax credit, there is no application process. You're just going to fill out an additional form when you file your taxes that has information about the solar array that you installed. I believe it's Form 5595 for the residential, and then I have to look up the business number. But then again, if you have any questions on filling out the form, the best person to talk to on that is going to be your CPA or accountant. For Iowa, there is an application process. Here at Iowa Wind and Solar, we do handle the application process for you. So once your application is ready to be filed, we will handle that. And then you will receive a certificate from the Iowa Department of Revenue that has additional information on how you actually filed for your tax credit after you've received, they've awarded your application. With Iowa, there is also a cap on the funds that are available. So there's only $5 million available every year for this tax credit. And then once that cap is reached, any applications that are filed after that for the 2017 tax credit are rolled over to the following year. So basically, if you're not eligible for the 2017 tax credit because the cap has been hit, then you are basically first in line for the 2018 tax credit. It is usually pretty close to reaching the cap. Last year, the cap was reached, I think, in early December on the applications. And so basically anybody who filed after, I don't remember the exact date, but it was early December, did have to have their applications carry over to this year, the 2017 tax year. I think the last time I looked at the status, there was about, I think 75% of the funds had been used up. So this one, it's definitely the quicker that you can get your system turned in and on, the more likely you'll be able to get the 2017 Iowa tax credit. But we'll see, again, later, especially now that we're already into fall, it's very hard to make sure that you actually are eligible for that tax credit for 2017. And again, same thing where anybody who is applying for this calendar year, the system must be installed by the end of the calendar year. The Iowa Department of Revenue also requires some additional documentation about your system, but again, that is all handled if you work with us in-house when we file your tax credit. All right, so some other tax incentives that are available in Iowa. The first is depreciation. So if you have a business or commercial entity, you can depreciate your solar asset. So this is just like depreciating other equipment that you own. But you can basically do the exact same thing with your solar array. And again, this is only for business or commercial customers. As just a homeowner or residential, you're not able to depreciate. But if you are again, you do have a business or another commercial entity, you can depreciate your solar array. This again is a tax deduction rather than a tax credit. So this is just going to be reducing your taxable income to overall lower your tax owed. The solar depreciation uses the maker schedule, which I think allows you to depreciate up to 85% of your array. So this can really help your payback. Again, if you have a lot of tax liability or a large tax bill, being able to use that depreciation is really, really great. We usually see it covering about 20 to 30% of the system cost by just being able to depreciate that asset and lower your tax bill every year. The other cool things that Iowa has, which makes it a really, really great state to put solar up in, is they do not charge sales tax on solar arrays. So anybody who's looking into purchasing an array, you're not going to be hit with an additional 6% sales tax on top of that. There's absolutely no sales tax involved when purchasing solar. The array is also property tax exempt for 5 years, which basically means that an assessor cannot raise your property taxes because you put in solar. This could happen after the 5-year period, but most assessors we've talked to, it's definitely going to be kind of like a case-by-case basis as to how much you could see your tax bill go up after you install solar. But they do guarantee that they will not raise your property taxes just for adding solar for 5 years. Okay, so that's basically all I've got. A pretty short presentation, but I'm going to dive into questions now. I do also have, I'll leave up this slide that has just our contact information, how you can email us. We have both bbright@iowawindandsolar.com as well as expedite@iowawindandsolar.com. We do have people manning both of those. The bbright, you should use that if you have any general questions, anything we can help with, anything else you need to know about tax incentives in Iowa, what you might qualify for, anything like that. If you are interested in looking to install and get in our install calendar, you'll want to use that expedite@iowawindandsolar.com, and we will basically move you forward so we can make sure that we take a look at your stuff and get you a quote before that October 1st install deadline we have. There's also a couple other ways to reach us. You can chat us on our website at iowawindandsolar.com, and you can also give us a call at 800-8080-SUN. So got all of those options available. All right, so I want to jump into the questions now. Looks like we've got a few. Okay. All right, so the first one is from Nancy. Are you working with co-ops that won't do effective negative metering for solar customers? So this is something that we do. We work across the state of Iowa, which means we do work with a fair bit of municipal utilities and rural electric co-ops and other electric cooperatives. Their policies do vary by co-op because they aren't affected by the Iowa law. They are allowed to set their own policies. Some of them are great, and they do have some really great net metering policies for their customers. Other cooperatives do not have such a good view on solar and can make it harder for customers that, with the policies they put in place. We do have lots of options available for customers across the spectrum. So if you are on a cooperative or other utility that doesn't have a good net metering policy, we do have some options. We can usually add a battery to your solar array system that you'll also be eligible to get the tax credits on that battery. And it can kind of work around not working with a utility that has a good net metering policy. So it might not be as good as your neighbor down the way who's on a different utility that has a great net metering policy, but there are options. So it's something that we've seen basically still pay back really well for some of our customers on those cooperatives with less than solar-friendly policies. All right, so next question. So if you get a credit that you don't owe any taxes, do you get it back then in a refund? So unfortunately, no, you will never get a check for your remainder tax credit. Instead, that just carries forward. So again, if you, let's say you owed $10,000, but you had a $20,000 tax credit, you'd owe nothing, and then you'd have that $10,000 tax credit left over for the next year. So like I said, it could end up that you just end up not paying taxes for several years if you're not running through that credit in that first year. But they won't ever actually just cut you a check for that additional. So. Next question from Anne. What determines residential versus commercial? Is it size or tax form, or where can I get more details? So this basically just is if you have a business entity. So if it's, whether it's a sole proprietor, a corporation, just any sort of business entity, then that is what determines residential versus commercial. So if you've basically at any point registered business, that would be your distinguishing factor. What is the expiration of the state credit? Also from Ann. So that is, right now it's currently set to be 50% of the federal tax credit and follow that, that same pattern, but that can change. It's one of those things where we want to encourage everybody to talk to their legislators and make sure that Iowa continues to have the state credit, and we continue to utilize this, because it does make it really, really nice and effective. Will there be a seminar in the future for wind energy? We don't actually have any plans to do a seminar on tax credits for wind. We did lose the small tax incentive, I think it was this year or last year. So it's definitely not as good of a tax environment for those putting up wind energy, unless you can do large utility scale wind. So at this time, no plans for a seminar. Are your current property taxes exempt, or is that only tax increases? Unfortunately, only tax increases. So you'll likely see your same property tax bill, but they cannot raise your property taxes because you've added the solar improvement. Are there any other incentives and/or tax credits if a municipality wanted to do solar to reduce their long-term overhead? So there is one that I didn't mention, since the focus of this was more on commercial and residential, but for large-scale solar, there is a production tax credit, which pays out for anything over 750 kW. It's a 1.5 cent tax credit, or 1.5 cent per kilowatt hour tax credit. Unfortunately, we are seeing that come to the end at the end of this year. So we're really hoping that we're going to see some new legislation to extend that production tax credit, because I think it's a really, really great incentive, and it makes solar that much more affordable for those able to do large-scale installations of greater than 750 kW. The fact that the commercial caps at $20,000, it can reduce the effectiveness over time the larger you get, so that's why this production tax credit is such a great option. But right now we are, like I said, it is set to end at the end of this year, but we are hoping that we will see some legislative change and see that continue. Okay, what is net metering, and if we are a Alliant Energy customer, how is any excess solar energy that is generated from a commercial solar array handled? Will there ever be a time that we can fully disconnect from Alliant? Okay, so lots of questions in there from Holly. We'll start with the first one. What is net metering? So net metering is basically just the concept that you're kind of using the grid as a backup. So with your solar array, you're going to get most of your production in the summer months, because that's when you get the longest days, and you just have the most hours to produce your energy. So whether it's during the summer or at night, you produce an excess of power. So you're producing more power than you're consuming, and that is fed back to the grid. And then what Alliant or other utilities will do is that they will record that you fed energy back to the grid, and then when you start using energy, so whether it's at night or in the winter, when you're getting less production, whenever you start using that energy, then instead of charging you for it, they just credit you the amount that you overproduced. So you produce a 500 kilowatt hours in 1 month, but you've only consumed 200 kilowatt hours, you have excess of 300 kilowatt hours. And then as you are using that up, let's say in the winter, instead of charging you for that extra power, they just take that credit that you have, and basically it kind of works out, it washes. Will there be a time when we can fully disconnect from Alliant? So right now, grid-tied systems are definitely the most cost-effective because, again, like I said, we're kind of able to use the grid and the utility as a battery instead of having to put in your own battery system. However, we are seeing batteries get much less expensive and much more cost-effective. So I think if that's something you're really interested in, the time when you can do that is definitely getting closer. Right now, I would say that unless you have really specific goals, going off-grid is not going to be your best bet. But as we see the technology progress and become less expensive, you're going to see things get a lot better. If you had withholding from your work, wouldn't you get some of that back then if your tax credit is subtracted from what you owe? So basically, if you overpaid, then yes, you will still get your tax refund as normal. You just wouldn't get your, basically you can't have your tax credit come back as like, we only used X amount of it, so then I will get that refund. But if you paid in more than you owe, then you would see that in a refund. Okay, a couple questions from Mark. Does Iowa provide interest-free loans for solar, and do you use solar systems with microinverters? So does Iowa provide interest-free loans? There are, I'm trying to think if there's a program that I know of that's still operating in Iowa. There was through the, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. I think it's through the Iowa Energy Center. I think that they have a renewable loan. There's a pretty lengthy application process for that. But I will take a look at that and get you some more information on that, Mark. I think that's the only one that I know of, and I clearly don't remember it very well, but I can follow up with you on that after the webinar and get you some more information on that. I will say that though we have had some customers apply for that, and it does take quite a while to get everything approved and ready to go through that system. Do you use solar systems with microinverters? So our typical system, we're going to use a string inverter with DC optimizers, because we kind of see that as the best of both worlds, where you get the close to the price of a string inverter, but with a lot of the same functionality as a microinverter. However, for some systems where it makes sense, we do also use microinverters. So it definitely just depends on, one, customer preference. So if you did have a preference for microinverters, we would be more than happy to design that for you. And then also just what your solar array layout is going to look like, and if that makes the most sense as well, we do have the microinverter option. From Justin, what is the average return on investment time without any incentive? The reason I ask is our city pays roughly $1.4 million a year for energy. If there's no tax incentive to help reduce costs, is there an estimated time that it would take to get return on investment? So for large scale solar, so for a city array or utility array, you are going to see a pretty good return on investment without any incentives. When you're talking about that scale. So that is definitely a possibility. There's also some good financing we can offer that really helps. So you can basically kind of cash flow it right from the beginning. So I would say that it's definitely something that you might want to consider. And if you reach out to us, we'd be more than happy to help you take a look at that and what it could actually look like for your city. Can you speak to the insurance requirements for being connected to the grid from Liz? So yes, so liability insurance is required on your solar array to interconnect, and I would definitely recommend it even if you're doing an off-grid system. I would still highly recommend going ahead and insuring that, just because there are weather damage, tornado, hail, anything like that that could damage your system would be covered by insurance. So I would definitely recommend that. We usually see for the increase in your policy cost to add the solar, and it's usually, I think, about 1/4 to 1/2% of the cost of the solar array you can expect to pay in your premiums. But insurance, liability insurance, is required to be connected to the grid. From Carrie, what is the average cost for solar for a home? Oh, that's a hard question just because it depends. So it's really going to depend on what your energy usage is and what your metering requirements are for the utility you're on. So that can determine whether or not batteries are required. So let's say for maybe a small home with 1 to 2 people in it, you'd be looking at about $25,000 to $30,000 for a solar array to cover that, and that's of course prior to any incentives. So you would be able to get those tax incentives we talked about on that cost. And then it can go up from there from the more energy you use and the more people you have in your home. And the reason I mentioned the metering policies is because you might also need to add the cost of a battery into your system. Okay, so I do want to go over, we are just out of time, but I do just want to go in and check in on the Facebook and just see if we got any comments there that I can answer really quickly. Though for everybody who do have to leave, because I believe this is the scheduled end of our presentation, I really appreciate you visiting the webinar, and I hope it was helpful. And again, if you do have any other questions, again, general questions, just go ahead and email us at bebright@iowawindandsolar.com, or you can chat with us or call us. And again, if you are interested in trying to install before the end of 2017, I would recommend using that expedite@iowawindandsolar.com email. So let me just check really quick to see if we've got any Facebook questions. For anybody who does need to leave now, I really appreciate your attendance. Going to just navigate over to Facebook now. All right, and it does look, let me double check, I think we have comments here. Wait for the page to load, there we go. All right. Okay, so, oh, we do have a comment from Tim. Why does your website not allow us to view any of your products like any other website does? There's actually a couple places you can view our products online, Tim. The first is under, well, I have to pull it up, but there's I think it's under Why Us, there is an equipment tab, and that shows the most or frequently used equipment that we use. So that has our modules, racking, and inverters that we use frequently there. And then you can also go ahead and navigate to the Projects tab at the top, and that'll actually show you some of our completed projects. So you can see some of our example arrays that we've installed over the past few years. So if you do have any questions about the equipment, you can go ahead and reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you about that. And I think that is our only Facebook comment. So I really appreciate everyone for attending. And again, if you have any other questions, please let us know. And I hope you have a wonderful day.